There are only three directions. It can either go up, sideways, or down.
My mom thinks I'm doing okay, but she keeps asking me, are you planning to buy a house?
I think buying a home is a liability. Welcome to Green Mango, personal finance for immigrants by immigrants who could not even come up with a good name.
Hey, I like our name. I love mangoes. I mean, we are Indians. We're supposed to love mangoes. And green is for all the dollars that we are trying to earn in the US. So, yeah, green mangoes is great.
Yeah, summer was definitely associated with mangoes. That was always the highlight. Like we didn't care too much about the heat because we got mangoes.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I miss a lot in the US. We used to have a mango tree in our backyard, and I really miss those mangoes. Anyway, enough about that mangoes. It's making me sad. But this is Shreya, and I have my co host Kunal, who has made it in the US because he owns a house.
I don't know about the made it bit, but yes, I do own a house, and that's going to be our topic today, I guess.
Even though you might think you've not made it, but I would say by my parents' generation's definition of success, you have certainly made it. I mean, my mom thinks I'm doing okay, but she keeps asking me, are you planning to buy a house? And I'm like, no, mom, I live in the Bay Area. Like, there is no way I'm buying a house in the next, I don't know, decade.
Yeah, hot take. I think buying a home is a liability. Of course, there are ways to make it an asset that we will get into today, but traditionally, we are dreaming about owning a liability just because of our cultural assumptions or emotions.
Yeah, I would agree with that hot take. Like, I'm personally a renter. For context, I live in San Francisco, where like a two-bedroom costs north of 2 million probably. And I could just never see the math favoring buying as opposed to renting, even though the rent is ridiculous as well.
Yeah, I left the Bay Area for Denver. One of the driving factors was what Shreya mentioned. The cost of living is so high that the math never works.
Yeah, I have lived only in high cost of living cities like Seattle, Boston. And well, it was not like I was thinking of buying a house at the beginning of my career, but maybe 3 years into my career, I did give it some thought and I got into real estate. So I started reading up about real estate, but it just never made sense to me. You are putting down so much of your money in down payment in just a single asset. And as somebody who is on H1B here and with the increasing job insecurity in this market, I just never felt comfortable to have that liability on my shoulders.
Yeah, I guess let's make this episode a bit more interesting and define our roles here. Maybe you are team rent and I am team buy. And let's see if I can, by the end of the episode, at least have you thinking about switching the team.
That's a hard one, but let's try. So, I guess my first question is, how did you make buying work for you?
I think the big mental shift came when I started thinking about home as a liability instead of making an emotional decision based on the cultural aspect that we spoke about earlier, where I was looking at the newest homes and the biggest homes, because as we are leaning into our culture here, buying the new home and a big home is when you've actually made it.
You're trying to impress your neighbors more than you're trying to impress yourself, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So the shift happened for me when I started thinking of that as the liability, because bigger the home, the expenses are higher, the taxes are higher. So the math is never going to work. It also did not mean that I was looking for the smallest home possible to make the taxes work, because eventually, if I'm renting a three-bedroom home versus I'm buying a one-bedroom home, I am losing on the quality of life. And I did want to up my quality of life without buying this liability.
Right. That is so true. Like, if I give my example, I love an easy commute. I don't want to stay 1 hour or 2 hours away each way just to be able to live in a house. Like, if I'm spending more than 2 hours just in commute, how is even buying making sense? Like, I'm not even able to enjoy my house, right? And in most big cities, real estate cost is just so high that you are forced to buy in the outskirts where you have to compromise on at least a certain aspect to be able to buy a house. So, how did you navigate that for yourself, Kunal?
In the traditional aspect, I definitely agree that renting is a better choice. And I personally was renting as well. When I was doing the maths, rent was always cheaper than buying. And then I started asking the question, how can I make this liability into an asset that works for my lifestyle and what I'm looking for from my home? That's when I started answering the question one by one about what I actually want in a home. Do I really care about the newest build? I don't. I personally currently live in a home that is 20 years old and it it still works for me.
That's not even bad in most markets. Like, yeah, 20 years is nothing. Do you want to walk us through the process of how you went about thinking about this or finding this house?
Yeah, so I did the math backwards. So I started with how much do I pay currently in rent and what is it going to cost to own this home on a monthly basis. So for rough math or easy math, let's consider a $1 million home and you are paying maybe 5 to 10% down. So after that, you are left with easy math, 6,000 in your monthly mortgage payments, which covers your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. In short, we call it PITI or PITI.
It is a pity so much money is going there.
Exactly, yeah. And then walking backwards from it. So my rent to live in a maybe a 2 or 3 bedroom luxury condo would be $3,000 in similar neighborhood. So it is an extra cost of $3,000 per month for me to live in this home. We are not even talking about expenses right now. So this is all just out of pocket. We are only talking about the fixed expenses here. There are variable expenses like
Home and
if you have if you have a storm, your roof breaks or you have a water leak, like yeah, these are, I guess, bigger examples, but smaller examples are
I actually
maybe,
had a friend, they bought a new house and they had a water damage that completely took out one of the bedrooms. It was, I believe, a two-bedroom house. So they could not even live in the house they purchased for one whole year. They convinced your insurance to pay for the damage, and that's how they could afford some of the repairs. But it also took a very long time. I mean, we are all familiar with how insurance companies work, right?
yeah. So we are not talking about variables here. We are talking about only the fixed expenses for now. So if I need to cover the difference somehow to make this liability into an asset so that I'm at least breaking even, if not profiting, and I'm leveling up my quality of life. That's how I thought about it.
How did you cover the difference? Don't leave us in suspense.
Yeah, it's a strategy called house hack. Very cool term. I think I gravitated toward this strategy because I wanted to call myself a house hacker. That's what they call people like us in the community. And side note, my aspiration is to become a serial house hacker.
Okay. As long as you're not a squatter and just a hacker.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as I don't have squatters in my own home as well.
Boy.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare. But we are talking about happy things today.
Yeah.
So, what does house hacking mean and how does it help bridge the gap? When you are sharing a portion of your home with a tenant or a roommate, that is house hacking in its simplest form. So, in my case, we found a home that has a walkout basement, which was unfinished. And once we bought the home, the first projects that we did was to finish the basement. Instead of spending more towards the fancy kitchen or updated bathrooms, we took all that budget to finish the basement. That's how we convert a liability into an asset. Now, my basement is rented to tenants. They have a separate entry. We share the driveway and the backyard, but nothing else. And now my basement is a tax deduction. It pays me rent to cover almost 2,500 of that $3,000 difference per month. And I added value to my home by finishing the basement. So few years down the line, if I decide to sell, I am going to get all of that equity back.
That's a pretty neat decision. Do you think you had to move to Colorado to make this happen? Or is this something that is possible in some of the tech hubs that we have around the country, where I would say a lot of the immigrant population is located?
Yeah, I think before I moved, I did not think this way. So I cannot answer from experience, but maybe I can look back now knowing what I know. And I think it does work. For example, when I was just fresh out of college, I was already living with roommates in a townhome. It was a three bath townhome. I was renting one of the rooms and I had two other roommates occupying the two other bedrooms. If I had bought that same home back in the day, it would have cost me 800,000, which was a big amount. And in my head, I was at that time thinking I need 20% down, which I did not have. But knowing what I know, now I could do a 5% down, which I could have saved up over a few months of time to buy that home, still live in one of the rooms and rent out two of the bedrooms. Never let the tenants know that you are the landlord. Just be like a roommate so they don't knock at midnight to tell you that their shower is not working. But that way, I would have owned that home, which today is valued at 1.2, 1.3 million. So I would have gained 5 to 600,000 in equity. Over these years, I would have benefited from tax reductions of having roommates. And I was anyways paying rent, which would have gone towards paying for the mortgage.
But don't you have to pay an additional interest when you're not putting at least 20% down?
Yeah, there is PMI or private mortgage insurance, which is typically, depending on the value of the home, it can be mid hundreds to mid 200s. It is only until you have 20% equity in the home. So the equity is built while you're paying for the monthly mortgage. Plus, when the value of the home goes up, after a few years, you could ask the bank that revalue my home. And now, as long as you have 20%, the PMI drops. So it's not for age of your mortgage, it is only for the first few years.
Doesn't sound like too bad a deal then. But I think for me, I still value flexibility a lot, especially given the fact that I'm here on a temporary visa, like the H-1B. So just thinking that I have to pay so much, even if I lose my job and I have to be out of the country, like, how do you navigate all of that? Of course, I don't want you to lose your job, but if the situation arises where you have to move back to India or move out of the country, like, what are your backups for the house that you have?
Yeah, flexibility is definitely a big plus of renting. Yes, you do have the lease that you might have to hold on to for a few months, but it is easier and predictable to get out of a lease compared to selling a home because it all depends on the market. If you are in a seller's market, you may have a queue outside your home and have overbidding, which of course is pretty common in the high cost of living or the tech hubs that we are talking about. If there is a downturn and it's a buyer's market, you may have to hold on for a bit longer. But I think again, if you are thinking of this as an asset, you have done this mental math and you have figured out that worst case, if you do have to leave the country or move out of the home for any reason, you can rent out the space that you were living in for the time being and at least be able to make the monthly payments without feeling the stress of it.
I see. I think the other big block that I have is that I literally know nobody else. I don't have any family in this country. So, how do I even go about navigating this whole landscape? Like, it feels very overwhelming, like knowing realtors and property managers. How do you build that trust?
I guess selfish plug. That's why we started this podcast. So, yeah, keep tuning in here weekly and you will gain the network that you want. But on a serious note, the way I did it was to attend local meetups. There are many free meetups. Just go on meetup.com and search for real estate. You will find hundreds of meetups happening every month in your area. There are virtual meetups as well. So attend all of these, be curious and ask people how they started their journey, what they are doing differently. And there are realtors, contractors, whatever you need, they attend the meetups or someone who can recommend does attend the meetup. So you will build your network in no time.
Hey, that's a great suggestion. But, Kunal, so I know you bought your house a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure if you bought it during the COVID boom where mortgage rates were 3% or sub 3%. But with the rising rates, do you still think the math can make sense?
I think of it this way. There are only three directions the interest rate can go. It can either go up, sideways, or down, just like stock market. If it goes up, then you got a good deal. Whatever your interest rate was at the time, even if 7%, if it went up from 7%, you bought at the right time. If it goes sideways, you didn't win or lose anything. If it goes down, you have an option to refinance. But you bought at a time when the demand was low. So you got a good price. You locked in a good price on the home, and now interest rate is down, so you refinance and reduce your interest while keeping the same purchase price.
I see. So, what I'm hearing constantly is that we gotta treat it as a math problem. And if the math works out for you through sweat equity, through house hacking, then it works for you. And otherwise, it doesn't. And you can continue to be a happy renter.
Yeah, of course, there are ways to maximize rent as well. Tune into our other episode where we talk about points and miles. And
Yes.
not all the rent that you pay goes down the drain. You can still come out ahead.
Yeah. 100%.
So, based on everything we discussed, Shreya, were you convinced to at least consider buying, or are you still team rent?
I would say I am partially convinced. I just think personally, I am more well versed with the stock market. And given the returns of the stock market in the last few years, I would rather put my money in there for the flexibility. I just like having options. So for now, I think still I have more stability in my life. I am going to continue renting. But again, you have different phases of life. And if you're starting a family, if you just want a bigger space, if you don't want the headache of moving every year or every so often, then of course, buying a house makes sense.
Yeah, also, if you hate the command strips and just want to put a few nails to hang that painting, you don't have to ask anyone if you buy your own home.
Fair enough. Well, if you're tuning into this episode, let us know if you're team buy or team rent. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to slide into our DMs on Instagram.
Yeah, we are on all the socials at Green Mango Finance, or look at our website, greenmangofinance.com.
Yeah, hope to see you in the next episodes.